Okay.
All right. Are we unmuted?
Yeah, I'm gonna get this. Sure, because then the click will work. No. Okay, we should be good.
Well, welcome everybody to our policy at McCombs. All right. I'd like to welcome out Korok, who is an associate professor at the Mays Business School at Texas A&M, and he's also the director of the Mays Innovation Research Center. Korok is a labor economist who researches the future of work, and he earned his BS in mathematics from the University of Chicago and a PhD from Stanford University in economics. He's taught at the University of Chicago and Georgetown University, as well as Texas A&M, and he served on the Council of Economic Advisors of the White House. And so he's going to be talking about choosing and implementing optimal immigration policies. So we'll turn the time over to Korok. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, TJ. Great. Thank you for everyone for coming. I appreciate that. So I'm going to alternately sit and stand. I'm just getting over a little bit of an illness, so nothing serious. So I'm going to be drinking a lot of water, and I have this army of cough drops. So don't let that scare you. So just wanted to, can I show of hands? I want to understand where my audience is in terms of students in the audience. Undergrads, raise your hand. Okay, great. Grad students, PhDs, masters. Okay, great. So just this group here. Okay, so I'm gonna, I know we have a diverse audience. I'm gonna try to keep this conversational and interactive. So please feel free to interrupt me at any time. This is formal academic research, but it has a big policy angle, as you'll see soon. And I hope to believe that it has a lot of interest from a wide diverse community. So this project is with my co-author, who unfortunately died last year. His name is Edward Lazier, a very famous labor economist out of Stanford. He was actually my dissertation advisor at Stanford, and he has been thinking about immigration for a long time. And I always wanted to write a paper with him, and so I kind of had to beat him on his turf. And he, you know, this is very much a paper in the old Chicago style. We sort of take a first order look at immigration, kind of with a pretty simple model, and we want to try to understand some basic questions about immigration that we didn't feel people were asking. So, you know, I think we're really just asking two questions. And I would say, how many immigrants should a country accept? And which ones should they accept? You know, pretty basic question, right? You'd think that someone would have figured this out by now. And there are different ways of asking this question. We start with, you know, we're economists, so we start with the criteria of social efficiency. But that itself is actually not, it's not easy to define, because you have to, so efficient for who, really? So is it efficient for the world? Is it efficient for the country, the destination country, the home country? We're gonna think about, the model we're gonna build is really a story between a, you know, if it helps to keep it simple, think of someone in Mexico who has to decide, do they want to immigrate to America? You know, it can be any two countries, but let's just use that as an example. And at a first cut, how many immigrants should we have? You know, we actually admit about 1 million per year. Is that the right number? Is that too high or too low? That's something we want to know. And then once we figure that out, if we can figure that out, then the question is, how do we get the right people to come to the country? You know, how do we implement a policy once we've decided what the number is, the right number is? And that's kind of the second half of the paper. And so, you know, the criteria that we'll use is social efficiency, and we're going to talk a lot about the migrants, the potential migrants, the person in Mexico who's deciding whether they should come to come to America or not. And we're also going to take the perspective of America. Let's say America is the destination country. What does the destination country really care about? And it turns out something that we'll talk about a little later, which actually matters, is what's going on inside the destination country. This is going to matter. It's a big part of the political debate on immigration now, and it's actually a big part. It really changes the way the model works. So we'll be able to talk about those things. So so I think this is always Eddie's style, so I'll follow his style, which is he always likes to say, well, kind of give away the punchline at the beginning. So if this is the only thing you're going to remember, one of the big results is that efficiency, it's actually efficient. This is something that we discovered through many iterations of the model, is that we should have way more immigration than we actually do. And I don't mean like 10% more, I mean like 10x more. You know, the country can easily absorb multiple millions of people per year. And there are good reasons why it actually makes sense for US productivity to vastly increase the number of high-skilled immigrants into our country. And that does deviate from where we are. We really bring in about 1 million per year, not 10 million or 30 million. And so we want to both take make a prescription on what should happen, as well as try to explain.
Two questions. One, when you say massive migration flows, do you need some possible massive migration flows or any possible? Like you said, we should allow a lot of high-skilled immigrants. And I can read that statement two ways, that we should let in a lot of immigrants, or we should let in, when we're thinking about who we should let immigrant in, we really want to concentrate on high-skilled immigrants. And I want to know which one of those you meant. And then second, how does that answer, the answer you just gave, depend on whether I'm using your social efficiency criteria for the world, for the migrant, or I guess for the country?
Okay, thank you for that question, John. When I say efficiency, I mean globally efficient. So efficient for it's really efficient for the whole world. Okay. And so the first. And I'm not going to say if it's optimal for the destination country. I'll say that's optimal versus efficient, socially efficient, which is good for everybody. The reason I can focus on high-skilled immigrants is that there are enough high-skilled immigrants out there that even if we just focus on them, we still should have much more influx than we do. Okay. The U.S. has 5% of the world population. But our inflows of 1 million per year is a sliver. It's a tiny fraction of the number of the 7.37 billion people out there. And if we just even sort on skill, there's way more than a million high-skilled immigrants that we could admit into the country that would actually be beneficial for us and for them. Mm-hmm. So better for them because they can capture more of their human capital in the U.S. than they could in their home country. Better for us because we can then create lots of value by even just look at software development.
Right. We have all the complements of human capital.
Yeah, exactly right.
So the way to read this paper then is this is going to suggest massive migration flows of people who have masters in electrical engineering, not massive migration flows for people who have high school education. And that's fine. That's your thesis. I just want to know.
Yeah, that is the thesis. Yeah, and I think it's going to come out of the model. I'll show you why it's that way. But it's really a story about skilled immigration, because that's the immigration that the destination country wants.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a different question? This is to understand your model. This is kind of a cosine question, right? The model is set up to where the destination countries have the right to exclude people from their borders, and in fact will charge for entry. Right? Yeah. How does the model change when you can't control borders? When in fact migration flows are involuntarily for the destination country?
Okay, so give me an example of that.
So illegal immigration.
Illegal immigration, yeah. So illegal immigration is actually a section that did not make it into this draft. We do have a model for illegal immigration, and so it turns out that I'll just give you the punchline. The punchline is that the tails of the distribution, the very high skilled and the very low skilled, are going to want to come, right. And the middle is actually not going to want to come illegally.
It's a better descriptor for the American model right now.
Yeah, I think that's right. Exactly right. And so I would like that second. I think illegal immigration gets a little more complicated because you've got you've got the fines that the government can assess. There's the issue of deportation. So it just got too messy for this draft. I think it's almost worthy of a separate paper. Yeah. Okay, so the second half of the paper is going to be about implementation. Okay, so not to give away the paper yet, but essentially we're going to look at, we're economists. We're going to look at how can the price system, in one sense, compete with our existing world today, where today the government rations the slots, and the government is essentially picking who gets to come in rather than using a market mechanism. And so we're going to actually formally study this and try to make some sense of what would a market mechanism look like, what would those prices look like, and how would it work in practice. And I have another paper, more of a policy version of this, and I'll talk about that too at the end.
So one more question.
Yeah, please.
All these questions are about the model that you did not.
Right.
Which is fine.
Right.
So, this is a sorted matching model, right?
Yep.
Which is all based on these productivity metrics. The chief rationale for immigration in the country now is family reunification.
Yeah.
Which can be understood as a moral principle, but it can also be understood as an economic principle, right? Because families support economic development of people. How would you think economically about the family reunification imperative in immigration policy?
Yeah, that's a good. We're kind of negative on family reunification because I'll talk about this in the next slide, because it's not directly connected to the labor market or to a kind of a merit-based system. It seems like it's more a solution for people who may be high skilled, but they want, you want to bring your family or spouse and maybe your brothers and sisters over. It just gets abused, at least historically in the U.S. And you have lots of chain migration. I don't think we have thought about actually modeling the family kind of the way Becker would. Think of the family as an output. I think that would be an interesting extension.
Yeah, because I was telling about my grandfather's experience. He came over in his 20s, 1920. Yeah. And at that point in time, you had to have a sponsor. It was his older brother. Yeah. And you had to show financial wherewithal. Right. So that rule was basically a way to, I think, minimize the social expenditure, government expenditures supporting immigration. Yeah. Subsidy. I don't know.
So my dad came over with the same model. His uncle was his sponsor, and his uncle brought my dad over, and that part made sense. Yeah. But then there was a part that didn't make sense, which is my dad then brought his 7 brothers and sisters over. And if you look at my dad's friends in India, right, who didn't get the scholarship to MIT, they were his buddies who were just like a little bit below the cut, but they were all locked out of the country. Yeah. Whereas his brothers and sisters, I can say this because they're family, they're basically idiots. And so they, I look at them like, why are they here? I would go to these family gatherings over years, and I met my dad's friends. It's like, man, these guys they're just way more entrepreneurial. They were better at school. They were, more successful in India, but there's so much they could achieve in India relative to here. Yeah. So I think the good news is family reunification they've tightened it since 50 years ago, when it was really a lot looser. Now it's getting a little more tight. But it's still kind of the dominant form of immigration, and it just doesn't. To my mind, it doesn't. It's not really designed on economic principles, right? And it's hard to defend it when if you want to make hard-nosed decisions about productivity, and you have to admit a cousin of a high producer versus just another high producing. Why would you make that trade? Yeah. Okay, great. So Tom just led us to the second slide on policy today. So today we're living in a time of family reunification. We also have another. We have other different features of current policy. We also have primarily the employer-based policy, the H-1B. You've heard about that with software developers. This is actually really closely connected to higher ed, right? So universities like A&M and UT, they bring in a lot of students who see they're getting a degree, but that's kind of a pathway to citizenship. Once they get into their program, they go through this thing called OPT and CPT, and then they get sponsored eventually by a tech company. This is very controversial because there are caps on how many we can bring in. We fill that lottery every year by January. Okay, so the tech companies have been trying to expand the number of H-1B visas, but it hasn't. They haven't really expanded it that much, and so there's clearly a demand for more high-skilled immigration in our existing programs that we're not satisfying. Okay, and so we issue about 1 million visas per year today. Chain migration is what I talked about when you have essentially one person gets in and then they kind of bring everybody in. They kind of hold the door open, right? Like same thing happens at a bar, and that happens with our immigration policy. The other place this happens, which is another piece of the immigration scheme that's not productivity or merit based, is on birthright citizenship. You guys know what that is? Yeah. What is it?
It says that anyone who comes out of their mother physically on U.S. soil is automatically a citizen.
Right. Exactly right. Exactly right. So the places where this is abused the most, I would say, is both, and you have people people across the whole world who just fly in, deliver their baby. They've cracked down a little bit on that, but where it's harder to enforce is along the border. And so we have students from Laredo, Texas, right on the border, and entire generations of families. That's how they get their citizenship. And so again, it's not a policy that has any economic foundation that I know of. Yeah. Yeah. So that's another. So I think the point of the paper is that we can frame this conversation as a broader conversation about American competitiveness and general productivity in our future economic outputs. And immigration seems like the low-hanging fruit to fix. I mean, it seems like if we could solve the people problem, we would do a lot to improve productivity in ways that make sense and are easier actually than other things. I mean, we all know about the STEM shortage, right? And so you could say we could either educate Americans to become more scientifically literate, which we're doing, at A&M and UT, big engineering schools. But we could also just import smart graduates of technical universities around the world and have much of that benefit. And in many just like free trade, there are many times where it makes sense to do that rather than just to build everything internally. Yeah. Okay. So that was the high school shortages that we faced. One thing I realized about high school shortages, actually, I didn't realize this until I did this research, is that it's not that there aren't enough computer science majors in the country. There actually are enough computer science majors. It's that they don't actually go on to do computer science afterwards. So a lot of these engineering majors switch into other areas that are non-engineering. If they had all stayed in engineering, then we would actually not have the skills yet. But anyway.
They all go to private equity.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Or business or something else. Yeah, or come here. So that was something that I learned about in this paper. So we want to advocate for a skill-based policy, which seems to make sense to us. It doesn't seem like that revolutionary, but we're far from that today. And I think if we focus on skills and what skills are valuable for the market, then I think we would be in a better position. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to skip the prior literature.
This is a question
Yeah.
I don't know about actually. The current immigration law also has some language about people that come here for asylum or to escape political persecution.
Right.
How big a part of immigration is that?
Yeah, it's pretty small. Yeah, and we can even keep that as is, actually. I think if and honestly, I think with this paper, if even we just kept the existing system as is, at its same state, the 1 million, if you really wanted to do the most least controversial thing, keep it as is, but expand the immigration for skilled immigrants. Outside of that itself would be hugely beneficial. Then the system that we have today with the refugees, we can keep those numbers as they are. Even family reunification, keep those as they are. Yeah. Okay. So the way I'm gonna phrase this is in economics, this is an assignment or a matching problem between countries. And so imagine there are two countries, kind of U.S. and America, right? And we kind of want to ask who should be where, right? At a first order, like where should the people be? If we could make that kind of ask the theoretical question. So the way we do this is that we, we assume, which I think as an economist that we can do this, that people are not the same. Okay, they're not the same, and there are variations in skill. Okay, so there's some low skilled, and there's some high skilled people in the world. Okay, and that has a distribution over 0 to 1. So imagine, it's interval from 0 to 1. 1 is the best, and 0 is the worst. There's everything in between. And we're going to also assume that everyone in the world has the same distribution. So it's not like Americans are born to be smarter than non-Americans. Okay, we're not going to rig the model that way. We're just going to assume that everyone in the world follows the same basic distribution. There are smart people everywhere, and there are dumb people everywhere. Pardon my French. So the natives, the ones that are already in the country, they are drawn from the same distribution as the migrants. Okay, so now we're going to say that the Mexican farmer, for example, let's say he's a Mexican farmer, he produces some amount of income in his home country. Okay, and let's suppose that's like, we can calibrate that to be the average income per capita GDP in Mexico. And the most important feature of his situation in Mexico is that even if he's a high skilled person, he's kind of getting the same amount of income as a low skilled person. That's an extreme simplification. All it means is that he's not as sensitive to skill, as his pay or his returns are not as sensitive in the home country as it would be in the destination country. But we're going to take an extreme point and just say that it's high and low skilled are paid the same in the home country.
What if pay match productivity in each country? How much would that change the results?
That would change everything. Yeah, if pay fully. So the only reason we get a desire to immigrate is because you're
undervalued.
You're undervalued. Yeah, exactly right. So a core assumption in our paper is that America, as a kind of more of a meritocratic place, you're capturing more of your high value here than you are in Mexico. And the way we'll defend that is if you look at measures of say either economic freedom or about how capitalistic a country is. America's not number one, but it's higher than other countries, and that is what's driving this desire to immigrate. Hong Kong, you can say it's even higher, right? Some people would measure Hong Kong as more less onerous regulatory wise than even the U.S. Yeah.
It seems like a very strong assumption to me. And, if you look at income inequality, even in developing countries, right, it's pretty bad as well, which I think reflects, at least in part, productivity differences.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah, it may not be. It may not hold for every single country, but it probably does hold. To us, it does seem to hold for the countries that. Not every country sends people to the U.S. actually, right? So it's a small number of countries. If you look at the numbers of immigrants to the U.S., and so at least as a casual, when we look at those countries, it seems to us that the migrants would have the potential. That's the kind of the American dream that they're pursuing, right? Is that they want to be able to capture more of their value.
What's happening in the destination countries? The same deal. Everybody, your productivity is not reflected in wage.
It is reflected.
So this kind of seems to be bias your conclusion a little bit, right? Because it's not only matching people to the best country, but it's taking them out of the country that does a horrible job at matching productivity to pay, and sticking them in a country that does a better job at matching productivity to pay, and that may drive some of the immigration for a secondary reason.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. Yeah, it is. This difference between kind of almost like pay for performance between countries is existential for the movement. Yeah, if there was no difference, there would be no. It would never be efficient to move. Yeah.
So it's different from what John said before. Like the U.S. has every kind of complement to human capital you could possibly imagine. So we don't want big immigration just because we have those complementary assets, but we want immigration because we do a better job sorting talent than the home country.
Right.
So is that really the rationale in the model? Just as a better sorting mechanism?
Well, no, I would go further. I would say that the high skilled people are more able to capture their marginal products.
Sorting.
Yeah. So sorting could be one reason that happens, right? Yeah. So let me show you a picture. Actually, we should make this in a
I
second.
don't want to harp on this.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think it's a big deal because it doesn't mean we need more computer scientists in the US because they're more highly valued here. It means we need more computer scientists in the US because we do a better job of respecting or reflecting their productivity than the home country.
But that's why they're higher, more highly valued, right?
Just because of sorting, not because the innate production possibilities 5 years in those countries.
So what do you mean? So let me unpack. What do you mean by sorting?
Sorting, matching people's pay to their productivity parameter.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the destination country does that really well. The home country does it so badly that everybody's paid the average wage.
Correct.
Right?
Well, it doesn't have to be the average wage, though. Here's how you produce you in the home country. So you don't have to be, it could be that everyone is more productive in the United States.
Yeah.
Or it could be that on average, everyone is the same level of productivity. You're just changing you effectively.
Yeah, but it's not going to be that everyone's more productive in the U.S. The high types will be more productive in the U.S. The low types would actually prefer. Let me show you the picture. To be in the so here's the simple picture, right? So imagine you is that flat line, right? And so everyone in Mexico gets paid you, regardless of their type. Were they to move to the U.S., they would get the slanted line.
Right.
Only the high types would actually be better off. The low types, there's some, if you're homeless in Mexico, it's better to be homeless in Mexico than be homeless in the U.S. So that could be the case. So the assumption is that these two countries have different slopes, and that the destination country, the slope is higher. That is for sure an assumption. Yeah. Does that seem too strong for you?
No.
Okay.
I'm letting it settle in.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought the generalized idea here was more what John said earlier, is that you want high school people to migrate to the countries that have complementary assets to them. Right? Here, it seems like you want the high school people want to go to the destination countries simply because their productivity will be recognized.
Yeah, I would probably say I'm just doing a reduced form version of what John is saying. Yeah, I'm not modeling the complementarity. I'm just saying that's what shows up in this. That's why this pay performance curve is steeper. Yeah. Okay, so then let me just talk a little bit about the immigration policy. So we start pretty abstract, but then we get more applied. So imagine that the destination country can pick who does it want to come to the U.S. It's a subset of the world population, and it turns out because of what I just showed you, that graph, you're going to want the best people, right? That you're going to want the high types because those are the ones that you will get the most value out of. And so our core assumption here is that the social value of a migrant is a function of this value function V, this V of theta, times the productivity of that person. And really what matters is that it's a function of the the number of people that you admit. So what that means is that if you start admitting huge numbers of people, right? Let's say we go from a million to 10 million to 100 million. If you start 100 million people per year, that's really going to change the character of the U.S. And we can't promise that over time you're still going to have the U.S. is going to be the same. So there's like over time, if you keep admitting a huge number of people, it's got to be that the U.S. no longer is. If the U.S. just imported the whole world, it would become the whole world. It wouldn't stay as that high productivity. So that's one of our assumptions, and we need that to kind of close the model. Otherwise, you would just kind of import everybody forever, right? You'd have like 7 billion people living in Phoenix. So that was just our assumption. So one way of saying that is that the value function is monotonic, right? So as you admit more and more people, that larger set, then that V starts shrinking. So the marginal value per migrant is smaller as you admit more and more immigrants in. Okay. So we're going to make an assumption that we have a linear or flattened value function to make the math easy. So let's talk about social efficiency, right? What does that mean? In this case, we want to look at, let's start from world utility, right? The utility of the whole world. So let's try to maximize surplus for the whole world. In this case, we have two countries. We've got the destination country and the home country, and we can add up what their utilities are, their payoffs, and say what would be the amount of immigration that would solve that problem. And so it's pretty straightforward. You know, we would pick a threshold, a kind of an efficient threshold, a social planner's threshold. Everyone in Mexico is getting their fixed wage, and everyone in America is getting their social return from their outputs. Okay, so I mean, it's a strong assumption, but this is like the most simple analysis of what that socially efficient number should be. If we solve this we maximize over the threshold, we will get an immigration level that's governed by these equations. Yeah.
So where do you account, if at all, for the fact that the productivity of your already American may be affected by immigration? Like, it sounds like, you know, if I'm immigrating to America, my productivity is VF8S times my actual productivity. But presumably that should be true for the guy who's already born in America as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is, you're talking about the natives versus the immigrants. Is that right?
Well, I'm going to say, like, it seems like that should be a third term in your maximization problem.
Which is the payoffs of the natives, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're capturing it all inside this. So we're not separating natives from migrants in the destination country yet. We will do that later. Okay. For now, we're just going to say that the total surplus. If these guys in the country can essentially use transfers internally to compensate each other, then I can capture what that social surplus is, and that's what the value. Okay. That's what the value is. Yeah. If you can't do that, you have to break out their utilities, and we do that later. Yeah. Okay. So here's their solution. So this is a pretty simple fraction, and it turns out that if you actually did this out, you know, this number is this theta s ends up being pretty low. You know, if you look at if you had to calibrate what are actual reasonable variables for the cost of migration and the value productivity, then you would have massive amounts of immigration. Okay, so almost too much. Like it almost makes it too high. So
that's a lot of people. 90% of India.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, right. Yeah, so we said, okay, we can't stop here. We got to keep going. Let's figure out what's going on.
And we're just cherry picking. We're taking the best talent out of those.
That's right. Exactly right. That's right. So yeah, if that's all you cared about, you would import like most of India. That wouldn't work. Right? Okay. So now let's think about what for the migrants problem. What is he thinking about? Well, if he comes to the U.S., he pays a tax rate. Okay, tax rate T. He captures some residual value of his surplus. Okay, that's the value that the migrant captures. He also gets a transfer. Okay, he gets a social. What is that transfer? That's basically the cost of the government's cost of supporting all individuals in the U.S. Okay, so Social Security, so social services. Those are all the fixed benefits that they get, and then he's going to migrate if his return, if he's better off with a after-tax share of his value plus his social services minus his cost of immigration if he's better off than staying in Mexico. Okay, so kind of a simple condition, which gives a threshold for the migrants. Okay, so this gives another way of asking if the migrants could decide when to come, then what would that look like? And one thing that falls out of this part of the model is in 1900 we had open immigration, right? In open immigration, anyone could come. They just show up. There was no vetting process. Whoever wants to come could show up. And back then we also didn't have the welfare state. 120 years ago. So there was no real cost for the country for bringing in all the people from the Statue of Liberty. Now, open immigration probably doesn't make any sense because it costs the government a lot per person, the amount of social services that we give for anyone in the, and that's much of the resistance against illegal immigration, right? A lot of that debate is about social services that the immigrants are getting. Okay, so still we have big flows because of these numbers. So we haven't solved the problem yet. So now let's ask what the destination country does. Okay, so here, the destination country, what does America care about? Well, America is getting the high type, so it's going to set a threshold and it's going to capture the surplus from the best people, and it's going to get taxes off of those people, and it's going to pay for every person a social welfare payment. And if we solve the destination country's problem, we get another threshold for the destination country, which turns out that it's higher than it's going to be higher than the efficient threshold, but it's still pretty high. It still implies a lot of immigration. So depending on what if you calibrate the S and T and V, it turns out that this will be higher than your efficient threshold. And we ignore transfers in this model, but again, we're going to get to the other model later. Yeah.
With these high immigration and social, do we have to worry about like emigration caps to the brain drain and these kind of like, for example, India doesn't want to lose all of their talent, or China doesn't want to lose all of its talent, so there's an immigration cap.
Right.
Like China does, you would have to come back.
Right.
These kind of things. Do we have to worry about that?
So we don't have that in the model. We basically say that the home country is not restricting the outflows, that it's fully voluntary. But you could imagine that there are constraints on doing that. Yeah. I don't know. Are there in real life? I mean, I don't know.
There are some, right? China has these.
Yeah, I don't know. How does that? Do you know how that works?
They're pretty minimal. They're pretty minimal. But they have them.
Yeah.
There are countries that have these.
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, the big problem for someone from India or China who wants to come to the United States is U.S. immigration service, not.
Yes, but if we were to have these,
Yeah.
maybe I would be curious.
Yeah.
If we hit that
Right.
limit,
Right.
that would be interesting.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. The break rate, right? Yeah.
That's kind of a strange condition, right? If S is 0, then we want everybody from the home country to immigrate.
Yeah, that's right. So that would sort of explain open immigration, right? It would explain that when S was 0 back in 1900, there was no threshold. There was no hurdle that the country put on, because why right? Why bother restricting immigration? Because if there's no cost domestically, you're only capturing tax revenue off of the new immigrants. Then great. But we can't do that now because X is definitely not 0 anymore.
Of course, in 1900, T was 0 too. So.
Oh right, that's always you can't solve this. Yeah. right. Yeah. Those are the days. Yeah. So we can do some comparative statics just on this. Most of these should be obvious. These are directional changes in these things. So, for example, when you increase social services, let's say you increase the welfare state, what is that going to do to immigration? It's just a transfer between people. So socially, it's not going to matter. For social planning, it's not going to matter. But it is going to induce more immigration. From the migrant is going to be better off because he's almost getting paid for nothing, right, by coming to the U.S. That's your welfare state. So he's going to be more likely to come, but it's increasing the cost for the destination country. So the destination country is going to be worse off with a higher social transfer. Similarly, if the tax rate goes up, what happens? Well, the destination country is getting more money off of each immigrant, so it's going to want more immigrants for that reason. But the migrant is worse off because he's capturing less of his after that tax payment. So anyway, so these are just some different comparative statics. I thought the most interesting was that when the productivity parameter value, the value of each marginal immigrant goes up, then everybody's better off actually. Yeah. Okay. So we did one little. Actually, I'm gonna skip this. It turns out that we get an interior solution for the amount of immigration because of taxes. Okay, so let me now turn to what John talked about, which is the kind of the heart of the debate, which is that natives and immigrants may have different views, and they may have different preferences actually, and that actually is kind of the heart of some of the subtlety of the model. And it turns out that a lot of our initial results no longer hold in this case where capital and labor have different views on immigration. And this is I think how, you know, again, this is a little of our Chicago approach. We're going to split the country into capitalists and, you know, maybe it's less on Marxist, but capital and labor, and that the capital essentially is employing the labor, and the labor are working and they're paid, but they don't capture the residual claimants are the capitalists. So, and we want to explain why the destination country is only letting in about 1 million people. Okay, so immigration has winners and losers, right? Some people are going to win, some people are going to lose. Let's think about that. Let's think about a guy who owns a factory, right? And think of the person working in that factory. We let in more immigration, so now there's more competition for the labor market. So the worker may lose his job because he's getting displaced by another worker who's willing to work at a lower price. But that's actually very good for the owner, right? The owner wants to maximize his profits, so he's actually much better off with more immigration because he wants that competition. So people are gonna, with the immigration, people are gonna have different views towards. They're gonna have different payoffs from capital and labor will have different payoffs, and in this sense, there are winners and losers from immigration. So we break it into capital and labor, and we take kind of a human capital model, and we say that, let's imagine that we start with the payoffs of the natives. Okay, so this is the number of people in the U.S. today, and and then we take their average productivity, and then we add in the immigrants, the immigrants that we bring in above some level of immigration choice. Okay, and that's going to be our total labor stock. It's the natives plus the new immigrants. And so we're gonna solve for, it turns out solving for that total labor pool is the same as solving for the threshold. We want to figure out how many immigrants we should bring in. So the tension that I talked about is exactly what I just said. You know, the way we formalize this is that the labor market, they earn, the workers earn wages based off their productivity, okay? And that's a function of their type. So the better workers are paid more. So there's generally in the economy, there's some sense that if you're a better worker, you capture more of your value. And the returns to capital actually are skewed by this term beta. Okay, this beta term is essentially, it's capturing how much skewness there is in the income distribution in the destination country. So when beta is 0, let's say it's 0, capital is basically evenly distributed. But when beta gets high, what that means is that the high types are capturing more of the capital. Okay, so it's kind of a measure of the inequality within the destination country. Okay, so let me explain why that matters. So it turns out that we can show that the optimal immigration threshold is decreasing in theta and beta for sufficiently high theta. So what does that mean? That means that when so let me yeah, this is, I think the intuition is a little more. Imagine that the capital is uneven. Okay, so the beta term is very high. The high ability natives own a lot of the capital. So for them, letting in more immigrants depresses the wages, but it returns the capital. It raises the returns to capital, so they're better off. It's very good for the very high ability natives. But if beta was 0, if capital was evenly approached, the reverse would be true. That it's not only the case that the high types own the capital, and then letting in more immigrants would depress wages, but may actually increase wages. Okay, so let me explain what that it was kind of surprising to us, but we found that under a broad class of production functions, Cobb Douglas initially, but then even more generally at CES, that we get these corner solutions that either there's full or no immigration in the economy, and the reason is that you sort of have either you like immigration or you don't. And either the economy is mostly capitalistic, where the capitalists want to bring people in, or it's mostly based on labor. The median voter is the labor, and they want to keep immigration out. It's kind of one of these two results. Okay, so if you're getting a lot of income from capital, right? You're a capitalist. You want more immigration, and if you're getting most of your income in wages, you don't want that competition, so you prefer less immigration. So this is probably it may sound a little surprising that the capitalists want more immigration, but remember, they want that wage out competition. They want to drive those wages down so that they can capture more of the returns. And so this beta parameter is actually going to govern how much you want immigration versus not. So we actually then, so again, more intuition here. So when beta is high, when the economy is very skewed, the ownership is uneven. So that means that the median voter owns very little capital and therefore opposes immigration. And when beta is low, the capital is evenly distributed. The median voter owns a lot of capital and actually wants immigration. And so we actually empirically validated this. We looked at we measured capital ownership with the Gini coefficient. And it turns out that the economies with high inequality in general restrict immigration, kind of consistent with our prediction. So that was our, we have a table actually where we show that to be true. Here's a little graph. Like the first country would be you could say a country like Brazil or India with really high inequality. Okay, and so with the beta being very high. And what happens here is that as you get more immigration, you're lowering the payoffs to the median person who doesn't capture much of that. It is basically worse off because of the wage competition rather than the returns to capital. In another country where beta capital is evenly distributed, let's say Sweden, then as you increase immigration, the median voter is better off, and you want more immigration. So you're going to be in one of these two. The country is going to basically divide into one of these two categories. Yeah. Okay. So here's our we ran these regressions to get, and it turns out this is at a first order. It seems to follow what we observe empirically. Okay, so I won't go to these details yet. Okay, let me talk about the implementation. Okay, so now that we sort of, what did we just learn? We learned that for pure efficiency, we will want massive migration, but we may not get exactly that huge amount of migration if there are if capital and labor treat each other differently. If they have differential treatments of immigrants inside the destination country. So what we tried to do then is we said, well, how would we implement an immigration policy? Whatever you like from the previous section, let's say you pick one of the benchmarks and you say, how would we implement that? How do we get the people to come to the country? And so, we kind of naturally thought of the price mechanism as one way to do it, where instead of the government picking, that person A versus person B could come, instead we use the market system, so that we allow the government to set a price, and then anyone who's willing to pay that price can come into the country, right? So it sounds a little strange, but we use prices everywhere else. Why not try it with immigration? So one of the benefits is that we don't have to actually observe the ability because you're just picking the price. So you don't have to worry about the government saying that, if you study computer science, that counts as STEM. And because you're in the special category of H-1B, which is happening right now, that's how they, you get a special. The government's basically making a stand on what counts as skill. So instead, we can use the price mechanism. And then the other benefit is that if the destination country is collecting revenue off the immigrants, then that's actually should reduce some of the hostility towards immigrants because you're making money off of at least through the immigration fee. let alone taxes. You know, you get taxes after the fact, but even when you just on the way in, they'll get some money. And then finally, you know, in any other market, if there's excess demand, why not just raise the price, right? That's the first order Econ 101 explanation. Right now, we don't charge anything, and there's a huge, we have a big line. You know, like I said, the H-1B visa lotteries, they sell out the first month. Let's just use the naturally use the market mechanism to solve that.
Don't we do that for parts of the innovate? Isn't there an innovation exception from certain?
Yeah, I think you're thinking of the EB5 actually. We have an EB5 program. It's very small. It's only about 10,000 people, and it's about 500. You have to pay about either 500,000 or $1 million of an investment in the U.S. Yeah, it's $1 million, right? Yeah, yeah. So it doesn't because it's so small. It doesn't those dollars don't go to the government. Yeah. So we're actually proposing the money accrues to the government. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, there's disadvantages. Well, you know, the government has to pick the price, so there's some issue there. We have some, you know, you could say it sounds unfair because the immigrants are paying kind of this rich country a fee. Seems that may seem. I don't think that's a disadvantage, but it can seem like that. And then you have brain drain, which is but yeah, I don't see that just too much of a disadvantage yet. Yeah, right, right. Yeah. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, we're gonna solve this like economists. We're gonna set up the monopoly pricing model, and so the destination country announces a price, and what price is that? If America had to choose a price, how would we solve that? Well, we know that if let's think about the migrants problem. The migrant is the same as before, except now he's paying this price, right? So he's paying this price, which is showing up in this extra term. Everything else is the same. And so now we have this threshold that's a function of price. And it turns out if you raise the price, okay, what's going to happen is that the threshold is going to increase. And so that essentially tells us that fewer people are going to come in when the price is high. And it'll attract only the best people, because the best people are the ones that are willing to pay that price and capture their value. Okay, so essentially demand is sloping down. Okay, so we have we can solve for a threshold. This is the migrant's problem, and given that the migrant is behaving in this way, what would the destination country do? Well, it's going to make off of each person is going to capture their value, the TV theta. It's going to pay the social services, but it's also going to collect this price that the government is going to collect. And now we can say, well, it's going to collect this over all people who are willing to pay that price, and we can actually solve this problem. We can pick that price, and if we do, we get a solution for what the monopoly price is. So it's maybe a little counterintuitive, but the most important thing is that it's consistent with all of monopoly pricing, which is that it's you know, as we know from Econ 101, monopolists are going to price above marginal cost, and they're going to restrict quantities, and that same thing happens here. Okay, so if the destination country was acting like if America was acting like a monopolist, it would pick a pretty high price. That price would lead to under immigration relative to the socially optimal level.
It's an interesting problem because if you start from the highest quality person and you start going down, the opportunity costs of those first groups of people are negative.
Yeah.
Right, your country's doing better than this country, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Does it even get down to where the opportunity cost is positive? Is the monopoly solution, does it impose opportunity costs on the destination country?
It does not yet, but I think that would be another thing to look at. Yeah. That would be another extension. Yeah. Yeah. We didn't calibrate this for more than this, but there are a lot of ways what this price could look like. We made a few simple assumptions from the end. I'll show you. Okay. We also looked at what a competitive price would be. So imagine imagine Europe, right? With Europe, essentially the countries of Europe, they're some level competing with each other for immigrants. What would that price look like? Well, it turns out that in a competitive market, we know that firms make zero economic profit. So imagine the countries made zero economic profit. What would that price look like? And it would result in actually over-immigration. They would actually let in too much. There's so much competition between the countries that they would actually lead to more immigration that is socially optimal. This was a little weird. We would have expected it hits the social optimal, but we didn't.
Yeah, well, what's the intuition for why a competitive market doesn't
Yeah.
result in social optimal?
I don't know. I don't have one. I just think there's maybe the requirement the profits are exactly equal to zero is too strong, and that's what leads to the prices just being driven down so low. Yeah. But I don't have a good intuition of it. Yeah. And then we look at price discrimination also. What happens if you could, and this is again consistent with Econ 101. If you could fully price discriminate, then you can maximize surplus and implement efficiency. And that essentially you're extracting all the area underneath the demand curve. We do a little bit of price discrimination, a little bit. You could say in the U.S. with the H-1B visa program, it's kind of more expensive and than the regular program, just in the fees, but not nearly to the level that it could be. Yeah. Okay. What Tom asked about these golden visa programs, we already have a golden visa program. What we're proposing is more radical, of course, and the ones that we have so far, they're small. You can implement these through taxes. This doesn't matter as much. Okay, let me tell you this calibration we did. This part's a little crazy. We actually wanted to say what would these numbers look like? I'm not even. We're working in the world of I don't know if any of you have calibrated a model, but if you start asking deep questions of how closely is the model reflecting reality. We wanted to get a number actually. So Becker and Lazier, they wrote an op-ed. Gary Becker and Edward Lazier wrote an op-ed in 2013, almost a decade ago, that the price should be about $50,000. And they kind of made that number up, but they've gotten posted in Wall Street Journal. They're like, hey, and they came up, well, we would make all this money from it. And so we said, okay, well, are we even in the order of magnitude? So it turns out that we're actually going to have a different price per country because countries have different incomes. You don't want to have the same price for Sweden as you do for Ethiopia because they have different incentives to migrate, and you have to, and you're often going to have different. The destination country is going to have different prices. So
wait, that means you should have higher prices for Ethiopia.
Higher prices for Ethiopia, exactly right. Because more Ethiopians want to come, and so you want to discourage them. So the way you do that is you can't have everybody, so you raise the prices. Exactly right. So
it's a little weird. We're turning Ethiopians $500K and Swedes $500.
Right. It seems weird, right? But not if you think about it from the destination country's perspective, right?
This is econ world, not equity.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's right. So we're going to get a different price. So Becker and Lazier, they're like $50,000 is a uniform price. We're not going to, uniform prices don't make sense because your optimal monopoly price depends on your income of the home country. Congestion effects are going to matter. And reality is that we don't know what the true functional form of V is. So we're going to just make some assumptions. So we're going to assume that the value function is linear. We don't have a view on whether it's actually linear or has some curvature in it. We just wanted to get a solution. And if we do that, we can actually solve for the optimal policy and prices in closed form. It gets a little messy, but it actually is something we can actually calibrate. And so now all we have to do is come up with estimates of everything in that equation. So S hat, what is the average? So this is again, all of these numbers can be debated. We tried to do a first order approach. What is the size of the social safety net in the U.S. for the average person? Around $8,000. I mean, the way we calculated, we took total social spending divided by the population that receives social benefits. It comes out to about $8,000 a person. This is the average income in Mexico, about $10,000 per person per capita. Average tax rate in the U.S., not the average, is at 25%. And then the cost of this one was what is the cost of it doesn't really matter that much, but we looked at flights for a family from Mexico City to Houston or Mexico City to Washington D.C. Ballpark number, around $1,000. If you do all this, you still have to measure V. And what we did, we tried to do the most kind of innocuous way to measure the value function is we can interpret the value function as the marginal product of labor. Without getting into too much details, there's a big literature in labor on what is the returns, how much wages in a home country, in a destination country change with immigration. So we essentially are estimating immigration changes on wages. Anyway, there's sort of an empirical. We get to a number for this country for Mexico, but around $40,000. So make sure I'm going to skip this part. So let me show you the table. So here we go. So the highest I think is around $80,000. Who's high here? Okay, well anyway, somewhere in there. But there's some countries that are zero, like Denmark is zero and Norway is zero. So that the richest countries are zero because we don't need to discourage them from immigration. They don't necessarily want to come anyway. They're rich enough that they don't have to.
What are China and India?
What are their prices? Yeah, India is 32 here. So that's pretty low actually. I think that's, you could make the argument that's too low. In China is around 28, so kind of roughly the same. Anyway, so this was one cut at trying to get a measure of. Okay, now I have until 5:30. Is that right? I probably won't go all the way. I'll just
Fine.
yeah, probably 5:50. So I thought one thing that I have a separate policy paper actually about how to implement this concept of an immigration visa, how it would actually work in practice. And I think one way to think of this is that imagine that one way this could actually work is that the capital market would eventually develop to provide these loans for these prices, even if the prices were high. Like, let's say the price was $100,000, right, to come to the U.S. And you think, well, some smart software developer who has no income doesn't have that because that's why he's coming to America. He wants a job at Google. But then we think that the capital markets would be perfectly suited, better than the government today, in lending for these high skilled immigrants. That they would develop like a credit score or a FICO score for immigrants, just like we have for credit risk in the U.S. And so you can think of people taking out a loan similar to a mortgage. You pay back over time. You pay this loan, pay off. You get a job, you get an offer from Google, right? And that is kind of just like your W-2 income for a mortgage. It's your way to prove to the government that you can actually pay off this loan. So you get a loan off of your immigration fee. The banks assess the risk. Maybe they're third-party companies like FICO that outsource the risk assessment. And ultimately, the immigrant is responsible for paying that fee. And so if he switches jobs, he goes from Google to Facebook, he still has to pay the residual balance on his immigration mortgage. And let's say he wants to become an entrepreneur. Still, he would have to pay that fee, right? Pay the balance of his fee. If he's successful enough, the venture capital market should factor that into whether they're going to fund a certain business. And so they would put that, in their funding documents, they would make sure that they have some amount of capital that goes towards paying the fee for the entrepreneur. So we believe, at least I do, that there could be a robust market that could develop around these immigration fees if they were sufficiently high, that would shift some of the onus from governments today, which are deciding who comes in and who comes out, to the capital market that are specifically in the business of taking risk and assessing risk.
So I thought this already went on in labor markets through H-1B visas, right? So you hire a foreign national came to the country, the company vouches for them, pays their fee, and employs them. Isn't that the way?
Yeah. So there are a few differences. So one is that those fees are not that high. So they're in the thousands, not the tens of thousands. The company does bear most of those fees. That's probably the biggest difference. Here, the immigrant has to pay the fee. And so you can imagine that, well, maybe Google is paying for it on behalf of the developer, but ultimately companies today in H-1Bs are paying those fees. rather than kind of being on the responsible for the immigrant. And the reason that matters is that now it gets very tricky of what happens when the immigrant wants to leave that company, because the company has paid this fee, and then he's like, well, do we deport you or what? So we want to allow for mobility from the outset. And then the other thing with the H-1B is that I mean the H-1B is you're paying these fees as a kind of after this lottery. We want to get rid of the lottery altogether and say, hey, we don't need we don't need to randomize. We can just have a high enough fee and then let the market dictate on who.
So you're just ruminating that you think a market like this would emerge.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is not in the model. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Something, what's the security for the loan?
Exactly right.
Issue.
That's right.
This is back to this family reunification or chain migration. Those may have been ways to get security networks.
Right.
People that come to the country.
Yeah. So what do you mean by that?
Brothers, your brother brings you over and signs for
Right.
financial liabilities.
Yeah.
And that's what happened in the 20s and 30s in the last century.
Right. Yeah, we could conceivably have capital market solutions for all of those.
Yeah. But I think a lot of them are not economic. I think they're going to be back area and they're going to be family based.
That's right. Yeah, and that is something I think to explore. Kind of a family model of integration. Yeah. The other reason we like the price. If you set a high enough price, right, essentially the market is going to decide for you on which skills are going to, because the skills that are valuable are the ones that will have a high return to the market and will receive the best job offers. So today it's computer science. Tomorrow it may be something else. Rather than bureaucrats picking skill A versus skill B, just pick a high price and let the market decide. Yeah, please.
Wouldn't it make more sense that it's like you sell off all the slots and you have the market decide price based on that, rather than setting the price yourself?
Yeah, so an auction, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there people have proposed auctions. I think there are pros and cons. I mean, auctions and prices are very close. They're kind of like differences of kind rather than there's small differences. They're not fundamental differences, so they're more similar than they are different. Both would be good, right? Auctions are more complicated. So I just think with immigration, it's something that you want to, it's something for like the average person, people in Mexico who are deciding whether to come. It's easier if they have in mind a price rather than having to.
Yeah, but you can still have it. I guess that makes sense too. I was just thinking of like, you sell off a set number of slots.
Yeah.
That way you know how many are going to come that year.
Oh, right. So you're still picking the quantity.
You pick the quantity in the market.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly. Yeah. So that's not that different from here. I mean, because here we're picking the price, letting the model essentially the quantity emerge. Okay. That's right. So they're basically two equivalent ways of doing the same thing.
So this assumes you know the quantity that you're going to do that year, or.
Yeah, it seems fast.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm assuming you know the kind of the demand function, and you can pick the price, and then you'll get the quantity that you want. In your model, right, you're picking the quantity and let the market determine it. Let's say you don't know you don't have the confidence in the pricing function. You just pick the quantity. You say we want 10 million, right? We want 10 million people. Let's pick that and then let auction off the slots, right? I just think that even in that case, if you the immigrants are going to have to participate in that auction, right? So it's just a little more complicated for the immigrants. That's all.
Or the employers.
Right? If it was done by
just have a price, and as long as we know the demand function, they're equivalent.
Yeah.
It's just like the problem with fisheries. You auction off the right cod to get one cod out of the ocean, or you say there's a permit for 1,000 cod.
Yeah, that's right. Well, exactly right. Yeah. The one thing that we couldn't get around is can we privatize the screening? And the screening is like those edge cases. Let's say there's a terrorist, right? And the terrorist has negative externalities in the country, and the country doesn't want to bring in the terrorist, but maybe the firm isn't. He's not paying those negative externalities, so the firm is more likely to bring in a software developer who has some low probability of blowing up the country through cybersecurity risk. So we haven't figured that out yet. How to if there's a way to does the government need to be involved in the screening process? So I don't know. I mean, I think that's the only part that seems to still involve some kind of role of government, which is if there are large negative externalities from certain potential immigrants, how could you get the private sector to internalize any of those externalities? So we don't have a good answer there. Oh, okay. I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. So let me just big takeaways. Social efficiency. We still believe there's some truth there that we should have massive immigration. Maybe, so when conversations about immigrations today are pretty small improvements or small changes, but at least from an efficiency perspective, we would expect way more. If the winners can compensate the losers, like in the first half of the model, then the natives would choose high levels of immigration. The countervailing force is that if there's inability for winners and losers to pay each other off, and you have these tensions between factors of production, then we could be in a case where the median actually prefers low immigration. That may be one world that we're in today, where the winners and there are limits to what the winners and the losers can contract over. If we do monopoly pricing, we get too few immigrants, competitive too many, but still the pricing is kind of better than our current regime, and we believe that the price mechanism is one way to try to improve practice as we see it. Apologies. Yeah. Great. Well, that's all I had. I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions. Yeah. Please.
Have you read that, or you intend to read, say, that whole other literature that sits out there, which are non-economic approaches towards immigration policy, justice-based or rights-based? And I'm wondering if you have any insights. How would you critique that literature, or how do you think your work would complement that literature?
Yeah, we have not. Or I certainly am not that familiar with that literature, and I don't know if I think for us our goal would be to advocate for the skills labor market model framework. It is kind of a radical. Well, actually, this idea came from Gary Becker 20 years ago. He actually had a bunch of they're on YouTube, actually, if you want to watch them, YouTube videos where he talks about this idea, and it really was never taken seriously since then. So we wanted to build a model about it and say this is just a different way of thinking about immigration. I think if someone really wants to play the ground game of real policy, you'd have to have a broader conversation. But we wanted to just say, look, let's plant the flag of what the economic approach would be, and then let the market, the political market, decide on where the compromises are. Yes, please.
So I think that's really, really interesting insight that you have about where the median voter preference comes down to capital ownership.
Yeah.
Would you go so far as to say that I don't want to use the word democratizing because that has potentially Marxist implications,
yeah.
But from a policy perspective, getting to where capital ownership is, sort of less, hoarded in Wall Street,
Yeah.
big banks that got massively bailed out
Right.
in 2008, that sort of focusing on that area might get to where immigration becomes sort of less increasing immigration levels becomes less politically toxic.
Right. That's exactly. Yeah. I mean that would fall out of our model. That's right. Yeah. As the distribution of capital becomes more even, then the median person is more open to immigration. And you can even think like imagine that. I mean, imagine like equity ownership, right? So the voters, if they have substantial equity in the factories that are benefiting from these immigrants, then their payoffs are going to go up when there are more immigrants coming in. So yeah, so more. We take that as exogenous, like what is the actual ownership of capital, the distribution of capital. But if there's a policy that changed that, or if that changed on its own, then that would be one implication. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Yeah, please.
If you had this set up correctly, basically you could only normal skin off high skilled workers. Why would its median and the below median workers in the US be worse off?
With more
Wages. Yeah. Or why would they be against foreign immigrants coming? Because wouldn't they basically, if it's only high skilled people coming in, wouldn't that basically not affect or wage or raise their wages?
Well, okay, so the high skill, so the you have to ask who's so we're assuming in the model that there's going to be some competition for the median person. That's right. That's kind of one assumption we're making. If there's no effect, they wouldn't care.
Yeah.
You're right.
Or maybe one way to admit is that for all labor, capital is a complement. And so when a high skilled worker shows up, we want to give them some capital, which then gets taken from the productivity of all of those labor. And what I wanted to ask you is what happens in a world where human capital, where you have capital, human capital, and labor.
Right.
Because you might imagine a world where we're having lots of Chinese and lots of engineers come over, that they have lots of high human capital.
Yeah.
Which then, actually is good for the perspective of, say, somebody just has labor, because that's now a complement to what they're doing as opposed to a substitute.
Right. Yeah, that
people who are designing chips are not the same people who are fixing the plumbing in my house.
Yeah. That's right. So that the right model, I think, would be capital, labor, and human capital. That's right. That would be the next iteration of our that would be like the right extension to do. Yeah.
But if that's the story, so now I'm gonna have to follow the question.
Yeah.
If that's the story, then you got to come up with a more complicated story about the politics here. So it can't be the median voter basically has not that much human capital, and so your story was that that we don't see these. At least I think your story was the reason we see very little immigration is because the median voter is against it.
Yeah.
But if we take this high human capital load, versus just labor story seriously, well, we should let in tons of people with high human capital because the median voter is not a Google engineer. And everyone except the Google engineers are going to be better off when we let in people with high human capital.
Yeah. I mean, that gets more complicated. So we don't have those forces here, right? Right now, we don't have the human. Yeah, that's right.
I was also just to say that the people that would be displaced, that people who work there, the ones with the capital.
Right. That's right.
Well, people who have Google stock and people who don't, we're never going to work at Google or anywhere like it, they both benefit.
Yeah.
Google engineers.
Yeah, right. Other Google engineers. That's right. So, without the human capital story, it's like in our model, the median native is that worker who's getting displaced by the incoming immigrant. That's why it's a simplification, right? It's kind of the first cut of the model is to keep it as simple as possible. Yeah.
I'm trying to think through the general equilibrium or kind of two effects of all this. I mean, suppose you model the world where a country could be either a destination country or a home country.
Oh, right.
And would everybody look the same at the end, or what drives differences at the end after all the immigration decisions are made?
Yeah. So I guess we're assuming. Yeah, if you could sort of pick. Well, we're taking as exogenous sort of the value function and like the value function. You could say the value function is capturing rule of law, returns to capital, how easy it is to start a business, all of the things that are so we take as fixed for the country level, and that's what's generating these differences in value, which are different than the sorting. You're asking what if you could pick all that, right? Yeah.
Because value functions are subject to migration as well, right?
Yeah.
Ideas migrate, countries develop.
Right. So I would probably think in the long term then you'd have some kind of convergence. So kind of like when the countries are, if you kind of roll the game back even one step further, right, and the countries probably wouldn't have these massive flows. I don't know. Maybe things would populations would equilibrate, and then yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Feels like a solo set to me, like all growth is catch-up growth, right? You're just getting to the frontier, and we're here, all migration is because the countries are so differently situated.
Right.
In terms of their mapping and productivity that we cannot count.
Right. That's right. And in the long term, well, like, if you take our model at face value, in the long term, all the high types would migrate to like the high pay performance countries, and the low types would stay in the low PPS countries,
Right.
And that would be the long term equilibrium. Yeah. And there'd be in the long term no more migration, right? Once you fix that. Yeah. Oh, except no. The reality is that the distribution of talent is random across the world. There's going to be a smart kid across the born in India or Mexico who's going to want to come to America. And one thing we did do is the reverse, is the immigration, and that's. I actually wrote out that model, but Eddie said the paper was radical enough as it is. People are going to think you're like totally looted if you basically pay the low types to leave. Yeah. No. Great. All right. Well, thank you guys.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Great, and I hope some of you guys can come to Texas A&M if you have not been there yet. It's a great place. We're hoping that we'll get back on the football field. So.
Oh man, that's gonna hurt.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. What would you now?
I think we should get a little team called Bama at one point.
That's right. Yeah, we're doing. So now we're good, but generally not really. But yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Thank you.